אני מקשר עצמי לכל הצדיקים המתים שבאדוננו וכל הצדיקים המתים שוכני עפר הקדושים בארץ המאפת רבינו הקדוש צדיק יסוד עולם נחל ממקור חוכמה רבי נחמן בן פגה נחל נאומן זכותן amen. So I had a couple extra ideas on Purim that I want to share with everyone. I took a minute to step outside the office and just share a couple ideas that I didn't get a chance to share yesterday that I thought were pretty cool. I actually was listening to Gedalia Fenster, and he shared actually a beautiful parable of the Baal Shemtov in regards to Purim, specifically from a story that he was sharing in relationship to a father and a son, because we know that the relationship of Jewish people are very similar, and compared to between the Jewish people as being the child and God being the father, to also being a father and a son, or a parent figure and a child figure. So something really beautiful that he was saying is that this idea that whenever a person wears a mask, specifically for Purim, right? And it's kind of funny how he also alluded to this when he was talking about how now today we're all kind of tripped out and we all wear a mask because of COVID. It's funny how the same way that we used to do this thing as a form of a disguise is now actually showing up also not only in the holiday, but is also showing up in our real life as a way of people disguising their actual face to show you how nistar the whole world actually really is. So funny enough, with this parable of the Baal Shemtov, he said that when a father was wearing the mask to be able to startle his child, and then his child realizes that it's actually his father behind the mask and calls out to his father, and then the father takes off the mask. There's this aspect of first Hashem reveals himself in a way that's hidden, and then eventually is able to take off his mask throughout the prayer, throughout the crying, throughout the requests of the son for the father to be able to reveal himself, which I thought is a beautiful idea. But it's an idea that repeats itself in Jewish history. And we see that most exemplified in the story of Purim. And it's very special in the story of Purim because the whole idea of Purim, as we know, Megillat Esther and the whole story of Esther, is that it's a play on words for the word nistar, and that things are hidden. And so that's really beautiful, the idea that essentially the Jewish people have to find a way in one of the last exiles and one of the last processes that we're in the last holidays that exist. It's actually a holiday that's going to exist after the time of the Mashiach, to enter into this headspace and this idea that in reality, everything looks not as it actually appears in the upper realms. But what we need to do in this world is to be able to peel away the layers of seeing all the disguises and be able to see the true face of Hashem. And so I thought that was really deeply well connected to an idea in Breslov Chassidut that through the different teachings that was shared specifically through the Breslover Chassidim up until Rebbe Israel Dov Oddesser, who passed away in the last generation about 30 years ago. And he had a mesorah, and he had a passing down of Breslov teachings that I never heard of anything else, and I never heard in any other teachings, specifically around the teachings of Purim. And he shared something that was incredible. So he shared something based on the Midrashim and the Sod in the story of Purim, that whenever Haman had called all his sons to find out the best time to be able to annihilate the Jews, they came to this date in the middle of Adar. One of the main reasons, which a lot of the Mifashim talk about, is because Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. So they said, okay, because their prophet passed away during this time, therefore it must be an incredibly weak month, and this is the perfect time to be able to kill them. What they actually didn't know is that the Brit Milah of Moshe, also like we talked about in last night's class, specifically took place on the 15th of Adar, which is Purim. Separately from that, Moshe is also born the month that he died. But this isn't yet the ideas and the novel ideas that the Breslov Chassidim are bringing down. They said in all the procedures, the mystical and the Kabbalistic procedures and the black magic procedures that the people were doing in Persia at the time, specifically the sons of Haman, and they said that even he had hundreds of different sons, and he would task each one of them to say every single day and to check every single detail of every single day to find the best moment and the best time to be able to annihilate the Jewish people. Very similarly, the Nazis had a very similar concept as well. So we see that this story keeps on repeating itself. And when Haman had done this process, when he had rolled dice, he actually rolled 3 different dice that showed the numbers 1, 3, and 3. And this was one of the mystical signs that he saw, that it was actually meant to be during these dates and these times to be able to annihilate the Jewish people, because 133 is the gematria representation of Agag, which is the Aleph is 1 and the 3 and 3, which is 2 Gimels, represented the king essentially of Amalek, which was in the direct lineage of Haman. And so he saw this as a sign, as this being the perfect time and the perfect representation to be able to kill the Jews. Now this is what's really incredible about what Rebbe Israel was sharing, is that if you look at the hidden, because the whole point of Purim is to look at the hidden part in the Sod, if you actually look at the details of it, you actually see that on a die, whenever you have the number on the top facing up that represents the number that you rolled, there's a number that's hidden that's covered on the bottom. So the number that's hidden on 1 is the 6, and the 3 hides the 4 at the bottom. So what Saba was saying is that if you look at the numbers in the hidden aspect that he had rolled, is that if you take the 6, which is a Vav, and the 4, which is 2 Daleds, you actually have the Gematria of David. So what's very special is that the hiddenness of Purim already began to reveal, even though they thought that they were killing the first Mashiach of Bnei Israel, which was essentially Moshe Rabbeinu, they actually didn't realize that they were helping redevelop and bring about through that destruction the hiddenness of what is David HaMelech. And this is the whole idea of Purim, because the whole point is that when Hashem reveals himself, and Hashem starts in the first aspect based on the idea of the Baal Shemtov, is that he begins in a way that's hidden. And it looks at first like we're going to be destroyed. And you saw all the Jews got despaired and all the Jews lost hope. And all the teachings of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov specifically come into the world to teach the Jewish people and show the Jewish people that we're not supposed to lose hope. Everything that Rebbe Nachman did and that he came into the world to do was to give faith to the Jewish people, to show every single Jew that every single Jew matters and every single Jew can do something very special to come back to Hashem and to be able to get back to him. What's actually incredible about all this is that, I believe it was Rabbi Avraham Yifra, a French Breslover Chassid, does his classes in French but also in Hebrew, was talking about how very, very deep mystically, the idea of Haman is that Hashem, whenever he's revealing himself, sometimes he reveals himself also whenever we're living. We see Mordechai and we see Haman, but this is why there's a degree of getting drunk on Purim and confusing the names of Haman and Mordechai. Because in reality, when you reach a level that's so high and elevated and you realize that God's will is one and that everything above everything else is for the unity of God, and realizing that everything has a reason and everything has a purpose, you get to this state where you recognize that in reality they're both the same in terms of the mission of Hashem. It's the concept of the Shema, which is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And that's why Avraham Yifra was sharing in his class this idea that when there's a reference to Haman and Amalek and the klipa of Haman and Amalek and the evil forces that are united within the names, it's referencing to the dror, which is the or the dardar, which is a reference also to the concept that Amalek pulls from this thorn, and it's also referenced in the creation of the world with Adam HaRishon, and that it comes from the concept of sin. So once you realize that all these forces and all these negative forces, which we discussed in last night's class, so if you want a little bit more on how to overcome the klipa of Amalek and enter into Simcha, and it's how to properly enjoy Purim, maybe take a look at that class. But the beauty of it is that Hashem purposefully does this aspect where he reveals himself at first in this really dark way that we don't really understand the mask that he's putting on. But when we're not meriting and when we're not understanding it, when we're not deserving it, we don't pray and we don't do our bodhidut and we don't get close to God, we unfortunately fall into this aspect where we don't see his face. So what we see is we see the revelation of Haman. And whenever we're meriting and we see the bracha and all the atzlacha and hopefully the salvation, we're able to enter into the concept of Mordechai. And so in reality, we have to understand that all these things, whether they seem good or they seem bad, they're all good from Hashem. And part of that is being able to be understood through everything that we do. So there's this actually made me think that last night I shared after the class this one of my favorite quotes of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov, and he said, "The day that you're born is the day that God decided that the world can't live without you." And it's a beautiful quote because it makes us realize and it helps us realize that all the despair and all the moments of despair and everything that we do comes from a space and a headspace specifically that we don't feel like we're good enough, or we didn't do something right, or we're not this, or we're not that, or we're not meriting, or I don't think I can win at this task, or I don't think I could overcome this yet, or I don't think I'm good enough to be able to do this. But in reality, part of being able to begin or to start new or to do hitchadshut and to renew yourself begins with the aspect of you being able to start off and say, you know, I understand that God put me into this world for a purpose. He loves me and he believes in me. Otherwise, he wouldn't have put me here. And when you start believing that there's someone on your team and there's someone that believes in you, it helps reinforce you and it helps believe in you. And that's what Rebbe Nachman was so special about. And that's why Breslover Chassidim are so attached to their Rav and they're so connected to their Rav, because when you don't do anything without your Rav and you don't do anything without your coach, essentially, is that you're living your life with this aspect that everything you're going to do, you're going to succeed in, and you're going to have help because he's there to help you. He's there to show you that you actually mean something, you're actually worth something. It's very important to realize that. I'm trying to think if there's something else I have to share. You know what, let's share one more story of Breslov Hasidim because it's beautiful and why not. Something that's really unique with Breslov Hasidim is that they were able to, at all times, be able to nullify themselves and be able to understand that they were really nothing. And part of that process is able to remove the mask that we think we have this fake kavod, we have this fake aspect that we're worth something, but in reality we're not. The only thing that matters is us being able to connect with Hashem and pray to Hashem with pure simplicity and pure love to help bring all the Jews back together, to be able to help bring the Mashiach. So there's this fantastic story to show you the degree of humility that a Breslov Hasid can have if, attached in the right way. There was a very, very simple Jew by the name of Nachum Shushter, and I heard this story from Nathan Uzan. He's a French Breslov Hasid who does a lot of kiruv and a lot of hafatzah and a lot of spreading of the works of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. And he was saying the story of Nachum Shushter was a Jew that lived in Eastern Europe, simple Jew, a cobbler. He said he used to actually dress like a cobbler, look like a cobbler, just a very simple Jew. If you would just see him on the street, imagine even, essentially 100 years ago or so, you would even assume that the guy is just the most average Joe that you can ever imagine. The little cobbler hat, the old disheveled clothing. And so as he began to go out and live his life, because he was an avid Breslov Hasid, he understood that even though he was a simple Jew and he went and he did his work, he still did his Teilim and he still did his prayers and he still did his Likutei Tefillot, and he especially did his Tikkun Chatzot, because Rebbe Nachman of Breslov and the students that are real Breslovers are very adamant about doing some of these things, like mikveh, like Hidbodedut, obviously, and doing Tikkun Chatzot. So he went in the middle of the night, as he was traveling in one of the towns of Poland, and he had gone to the nearby shul where there weren't that many people awake at the time, but he had woken himself up around 2 a.m. and he started crying his heart out and praying on the floor of the shul and doing Tikkun Chatzot. And when he began doing Tikkun Chatzot at the time, he started crying as if literally the whole world was ending. He was shaking, he was crying, he was begging Hashem to bring the Beit HaMikdash, which is an incredible idea, and it's an incredible concept that we don't really enter into so much. But nonetheless, he was just praying with tremendous fervor and tremendous love and tremendous emotion. And all of a sudden comes the big rabbi of the city. If you can imagine, Rav Mordechai, a big rabbi, a big mikubal, imagine the Baba Sali coming in, a person that's world renowned and that's famous, or maybe the Posek Halacha, Rav Ovadia Yosef, whenever he was around. If you can imagine this rabbi walking in, rabbi of multiple cities, multiple towns. His name was Rabbi Mordechai Halberstam. If you want to look it up, he was an incredibly world-renowned tzaddik, probably the tzaddik of the generation in Eastern Europe at the time, and the Chacham Ador. And he walks around and he sees this Jew, this simple Jew, little cobbler, praying on the floor, crying out his heart to Hashem, and he has no idea what he's seeing in front of him. He's saying, I myself don't even wake up and do chatzot like this. I don't even do it that often. And how is it possible that I'm looking at around me and I don't see a single Jew that acts like this? So he was so moved by this, he started talking with the Jew, and the Jew was just like so confused because he's like, why is this big tzaddik talking to me? Because it was actually that anav, it was not fake. And he told him, he said, what are you doing and stuff? He's like, I'm doing Tikkun Chatzot. He's like, I don't understand. He's like, could you explain to me a little bit more? He said, yeah, I'm praying for the temple. He's like, I'm not like you. I'm not a big tzaddik. I don't study the Gemara all day long. I don't study all the halachot. I don't study the Kabbalah. He's like, so for me, I need the temple because the temple is going to help rectify me and it's going to help bring the Mashiach for all the Jews. But you're such a holy tzaddik. You live in the moment of the Mashiach. So for you, you don't need the temple to be rebuilt, but I do. So he was so floored by this. He said, who's your Rav? He said, Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. He said, that, I'm with you now. He said, from now on, I'm going to take off my hat and I'm going to become a Breslover just like you. And at that point, he took off and he removed all his titles of Rabbanut and everything, and immediately went and found a way to be able to travel to Uman and to be able to immerse himself within Breslov Chassidut. At the time, the biggest Breslover tzaddik we can say was Rav Avraham ben Rav Nachman. Famously, we shared some stories about him in his commentary last night on Purim, from his book Koch Ve'or, where he shares a story about Adam HaRishon, how he's connected, and how Rabbi Nachman was in the body of Adam HaRishon and before he sinned and left the body, which is an incredible story. Check out that video if you want to hear more about that. But this massive tzaddik, this gadol, this huge tzaddik, was able to nullify himself in all his chokhmah by just seeing a simple cobbler being able to pray with simplicity towards Hashem, and he saw that is emet. And he said, if that's the way the Jew's going to pray, then I want to be like that. And at that point, he took off his hat, he took off his shtreimel, all his titles, and eventually made his way to Uman and be able to learn as one of the main 5 or 6 Talmidim that Rabbi Avraham ben Rav Nachman at the time had. And in that connection, was able to become a real Breslov Chassid at that moment in that. Be'ezrat Hashem, in connection with the story of Purim. And there's lots of very big stories, but to end it over there on that note,
May we have the merit of being able to reveal all these masks, to remove the physical mask that we have, remove this magefa, remove this evil sickness that brings a lot of tuma and brings a lot of impurity and also brings a lot of terrible ideas in the mind. We know that we're living in a world that's incredibly distressed and incredibly perverted in their way of looking at things, and we need to be able to realign ourselves with tzaddikim, especially the teachings of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov, who had beautiful and simple teachings to be able to help bring us back in simple faith to Hashem. Because in reality, there's nothing greater than being a simple Jew and having simple love for Hashem. And that's part of the machshava that we should have over Purim as we remove those masks and as we drink with simcha and dancing to enter into an aspect of kedusha. Be'ezrat Hashem, that Hashem should be able to give us the merit of removing the klipa of Haman Amalek, and Be'ezrat Hashem that we should be zocheh to enter into the kedusha of Mordechai and Esther. Amen. Ken Yatzon, Nachum, Nachum,